Hit him with the conditions will worsen. Is this the first stream since the capture of Maduro? Doubt it. No, I streamed yesterday. Yesterday was the first stream of the new year. So I'm streaming again today. Funnily enough, more things have actually happened since Maduro was captured. There's been gunfire in the capital of Caracas. Just a very short blurb from Al Jazeera. Video shows projectiles fired into the air over Caracas, where officials said unauthorized drones were seen over the city days after the U.S. abduction of Venezuela's president. Authorities said police fired warning shots as a deterrent, but gave no details as to who was flying the drones. Jesus Christ, what is wrong with my voice? Who would have thought that, yeah, Trump took my voice. I guess this is what happens when I try to do my fem voice with no prior warm-up. Who would have thought destabilizing the government would cause problems? Who would have thought, indeed? Certainly not Marco Rubio. I mean, I think they thought of that. They just didn't care. So, yeah, you're going to have to deal with my voice being really raspy. A lot of it is because I also get easily distracted in the mornings. My sleep schedule has not been great since the new year, partially because I, stayed up late on New Year's Eve and that had a cascading effect. So this morning I just completely forgot to do my voice training exercises. Not that I probably would have fared all that well either way, but nonetheless. It's super frustrating. Yeah, wow, they're evil. That's crazy. Maduro showed up in court on a related note. Here, hold on. Maduro not guilty plea. Here we go. But this is also from yesterday, but I think this was after I streamed. Maduro appears in U.S. court. Please let me read something. Don't make me watch a CNN video. Maduro's plea. The ousted Venezuelan leader and his wife pleaded not guilty to drug and weapons charges in a New York courtroom. A defiant Maduro told the judge he had been kidnapped in Caracas. Fantastic. Thank you, CNN. Completely neutral framing. No moral weight given to anything whatsoever. I hate American media so much. It wouldn't surprise me if Maduro was found not guilty of these charges because he's there's no grounds with which to bring those charges. Sure, that shit might be I don't know, illegal in Venezuela, but that's Venezuelan jurisdiction or whatever. Don't you know how moral weight to the left is terrorism? That's so true. You can never jeopardize national security by implying that we shouldn't nuke Venezuela 1 million times or something like that. That case is going to be proceeding. Here's how I think there's two possibilities. If this is a show trial, Maduro's found guilty and then he's sentenced to prison forever or executed or some shit like that, right? If this is actually a fair trial, there's no world in which Maduro is found guilty of these crimes. It's just such it's so completely not even remotely connected to US law, the things that he's doing in Venezuela as the president of Venezuela, right? Kind of like how Assad was a war criminal, but imagine going and arresting Assad in Syria, bringing him to America for violating American laws in Syria, right? When Assad was still the dictator of Syria, right? No, you bring the fucker up on international law charges, right? That's how the process would work. But there's obviously no thought given to that because that's not what this is about. This is about controlling Venezuela, building the technate of America. Shout outs to Kyle Kalinske. That's how I learned about that, or at least that's where I keep hearing about that. I learned about it initially, I think, somewhere else. And apparently, I did learn that like Venezuela has a specific type of oil that America has been relying on a lot more lately. So America actually does want the oil. Uh, increasingly, the type of oil that Venezuela has is called heavy crude, which is different from different kinds of oil that we can get from the Middle East or America. The kind of oil that we have in America and that we get from the Middle East is not heavy crude. Heavy crude is only obtainable from like three countries: Canada, Russia, and Venezuela. We already import a lot of crude oil from Canada. As America, there are some refineries in the north, there are some refineries in the south of the US. But because I think actually because of America doubling down repeatedly on road infrastructure, car infrastructure, and creating more pavement princesses that run on fucking black tar diesel fuel or whatever the fuck, America has been relying more and more on heavy crude oil. So that leads to America importing more from Canada. And it also leads to America, well, having renewed impetus to try to control Venezuela, you know? And of course, if you were rationally pursuing these interests, what you would do is apply some sort of diplomatic pressure, but otherwise maintain relatively normal relations and try to even normalize relations so that Venezuela will do business with America to give us some of the crude oil, right? It's not like that would be particularly difficult for the US to do, but fascists are stupid and they are belligerent and they hate human life and they want you to die. So they're going to do the thing that flexes their muscles the most and makes the most people suffer. You know? And again, it's like part of the far right project of like the tech native America, where d- characteristic of the 12-year-old brain that all the oligarchs and business people collectively share. This was a vision born out of like the 20s and 30s, where there was like fascist movements uh, of the classical fascist stripe around the world in the 20th century. In America, there was this idea coming from that movement with the oligarchs of America simply expanding, like returning to the Monroe Doctrine and annexing Canada, annexing Greenland, annexing much of Central America and some of South America, and basically whatever land America doesn't directly control, have it controlled by puppet states in South America, so that both of the American continents are controlled by the US. And basically, they just want to paint the map with the US flag real big. And that's the extent to which they thought about it, because more land equals more powerful America, right? And to them, that's how politics works. Like I said, 12-year-old brain, where there's like, I mean, yeah, land is a valuable resource, but like this is the fucking 21st century. And even in the 20th century, shit did not work like that. Um, it's their image of how to like do American revanchism and like get back at the world for humiliating us. What is the supposed humiliation? They would have a million different explanations because they all made it up in their head, and it's unique to each of their separate individualized cuckold fantasies, how America has supposedly been humiliated. But nonetheless, they agree on what we should do about it, which is nuke the third world and build the tech native America or something. Sometimes I think we should remove Rome from history. I don't. In fact, I feel like Rome should be featured more prominently. Half the people that like the problem with the Rome bros is that they don't know jack shit about the Roman Empire. Right? Like every time people reference like, oh, Rome fell because of foreigners, Rome fell because haha crossing the Rubicon, that's because people don't know enough about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire declined the same way as every other empire in history declined, as a result of internal contradictions that sharpened over time without being addressed, and a result of reactionary ideology coming to the fore, doubling down on those contradictions, and imperial overextension in a desperate attempt to remain the power that it once was, when it's clearly evident that circumstances are changing and these problems need to be reviewed. you know? And it had a cascading effect. Literally got split in two. Okay, people don't want to talk about this. Rome being split in two prolonged the empire for generations. If Rome remained a single administrative empire, if Rome was not split into East and West, Rome was the physical size of the United States like thousands of years ago. That shit barely held itself together at the best of times. You know? Splitting the Roman Empire in two made it an order of magnitude easier to administrate, which prolonged its life for a considerable amount of time. And people think a world government would function. A world government would function. We have proof of that because there is already, to an extent, a world government. It simply only exists for the owning class. Capital is international. I talked about this during the tier list video, right? Internationalism is a fundamentally good idea. We today have the means to do a world government of sorts, right? The political circumstances and will is not there presently, except for the cases in which this has already been realized because business interests are truly international. They know no such thing as borders. Borders are measures meant to constrict us, the regular people. I'm saying just one giant, and that's what I'm responding to. That's what I'm talking about. One unified world state, one unified world government. That exists for the ruling class. It does not exist for the working class. We know that it's possible. They have specifically tried to prevent that from being realized for all of the underclasses of the world. That is possible, and it would function. That's what billionaires are afraid of, because they know it would work. They have to devote so much fucking effort to stop that from happening. In terms of the technical abilities of governing, a world government is more possible now than the Roman Empire was in its day. It's just a matter of the political circumstances being vastly, vastly different. You know, capital taking a very different character. How we define a government and nations taking a very different character. And that, like, essentially, time to bring out the sign language. True, if it were not for the fact that sign language is actually different across languages. That's why in America we specify ASL, American Sign Language, because American Sign Language is still English. If you can read ASL, they are using hand signs to mimic letters to spell things in English with English grammar structure, more or less. So that probably doesn't even work, you know? French Sign Language, likewise, uses hand signals to communicate letters to spell and say things with French grammar structure, you know? Yeah, I'll just have my dad translate it. W dad right there. Many such cases. Anyways, I got distracted. What were we on about? Oh yeah, Tech Native America. I do wonder how many languages there are. Thousands. There are thousands of languages. Lost the plot like half an hour ago. That's okay. I didn't lose the plot. We were talking about Venezuela. I mentioned that this is part of an overarching project from the owning class in America, and by that I mean like the oligarchs. They want to build like the tech native America. Again, it's just part of the same project of consolidating power, and it is still about the Monroe Doctrine. It's also about the oil and the tech native America. Those are all like compounding and connecting interests. And they will ruin an already almost failed state to do it. As to the gunfire, this was actually like initially kind of surprising to me. If I go back here, there is video of this. Let me see. Oh, you hear it much more prominently from this person. Yeah, that doesn't sound like fireworks. Well, I guess on some level it does, but like we saw the magnesium trails or whatever of the arms fire in the sky. For my headset, it sounds like rain. That's some heavy ass rain. What kind of rain are you getting up there? I don't know. This initially this surprised me. I was like, okay, because what I thought was that the generals and the sort of existing power structure in Venezuela ultimately gave up Maduro, and and that was more or less that. That's why like America was able to roll in, just grab Maduro, and then like get out of there. But it's also possible that not all of the generals or not all of like the power players in Venezuela, the ministers, the generals, the vice president, whoever, it's possible that not all of them were in on the plan or were like co-signing it to happen, right? Like they might not have all been down to just let America kidnap Nicolas Maduro. And this could be the result of that. I think this is getting into civil war, like potential civil war territory where there's various warring factions in the government. Uh, that's the most likely scenario to my mind. In fact, I saw a poll a little while back when before Maduro even appeared at trial, which was like, what do you think is going to happen to Venezuela now that America is like doing this raid, right? And the options were, I don't remember what all the options were, but one of them was dictatorship, U.S. backed, and one of them was civil war. And at the time, I was like, it's a shame I can't respond to this with multiple answers because I actually think both of those things are going to happen in that order, right? Famously, nothing bad has ever happened from America trying to unilaterally topple a government and prop up a replacement that's very unpopular both inside the governing structures and outside of it. It only makes sense, right? The support is not unanimous even within the structures of government for what's her name? The vice president, the former vice president, now sworn in president of Venezuela, backed by the U.S., formerly Maduro's vice president. And Venezuela was already almost a failed state. The one thing that probably kept them from being that was the fact that they had nationalized the oil industry, so they had an economic base of sorts. Like, this represents a significant step down from the situation before, and the situation before was already very close to profound instability, if not already there. So I think we get the U.S. dictatorship, the U.S. backed dictatorship, which enjoys significantly less legitimacy, both at home and abroad, even than Maduro's government. And that, I think, is a recipe for a civil war to start brewing. And I do mean like the modern kind of civil war where nobody fucking knows what's happening. There's not like two formal belligerents. Sure, there are large dominating factions, but there's a million smaller like insurgent groups and whatever. Venezuela is going to fall apart, and it's going to be America's fault. You know? America's going to try to do nation building, but at like for the sake of taking all the oil from Venezuela, but like we're not going to America's not going to be in control of enough of the nation to do nation building across the country, right? I do actually think that this is going to be to hazard a guess, to get a little specific, which is very liable to be wrong, but I think the general picture is going to be similar to what happens. I will get to that 1v3. You guys remember the kind of relationship Russia had with Syria, where effectively there was like about 50%, maybe a third of the country in terms of like the urban centers or whatever, that was controlled by Assad's government and backed by Russia. And the rest of the country, there was like the significant part that was controlled by the rebel faction, which has now since taken over Syria. And then there were like a bunch of different insurgency groups, and they were dealing with ISIS and whatever. It was a whole hot mess. And you had the pocket of the dictatorship backed by Russia. I think that's what we're going to see in Venezuela, where there's a pocket of Venezuela, a significant chunk of it, but not all of it, that's controlled by the US-backed dictatorship. Then there's going to be like some other large factions controlling most of the rest of the country, which will include a lot of other urban centers too. And then there's going to be a bunch of small like rebel groups, and it's just going to be an entire shit show. And it's going to be a failed state for like a decade or more. It's going to be really ugly, and it's going to last a long time. And but the neocons are going to have a conflict with which they can justify infinite military spending, because the perennial instability means that there are armed factions constantly fighting each other for control over a region and legitimacy, like for the legitimacy of state power. You know, that is true. I do think if you're not even willing to hazard a guess, I think it speaks to a lack of imagination and a profound cowardice. But that's not to say you have to guess all the time. This is an educated guess that I am willing to make, because it's also consistent with, you know, fascists wanting to do the tech native America, but being extremely stupid and incompetent, right? That's why I put the word occasionally. Yeah, of course. But to come back to the international community, no way the world can just let Trump do that. I have bad news, 1v3. The world actually did just completely let Trump do that. Every single state, except for, I think, Spain, Norway, and Ireland, just completely refrained from criticizing the Trump administration at all. Many of them offering pretty lukewarm support for the United States, just going in unilaterally toppling Venezuela and completely ignoring international law. Like I said last time, this is the Trump administration, you know, in America, dipping its toe into the water. And if nobody says anything about that, then they know that they can just belly flop into the pool and nobody's going to say anything. And the only countries that said anything about this are Spain, Ireland, and Norway, which is not even enough for a broader international consensus to even start forming, let alone any meaningful action to come against the United States. As a result of this, you know, as we know, even when the international community is pretty united on an issue, as frequently happens on humanitarian matters, when conveniently the transgressor of human rights is a third world nation with no significant allies, the most they can do is like send peacekeepers and do nothing meaningful to improve the situation. It's just virtue signaling again. But in this case, very few countries were even willing to virtue signal that what the US did was bad, illegal, and like stupid and destabilizing. Like, Britain supported the US, Canada supported the US, France supported the US. Like, their governments all issued statements that were like positive on the US removing Maduro from Venezuela unilaterally, contrary to our own law, contrary to international law, much of which we are not signatories on. Thank you. But yeah, unfortunately, the world did just let them get away with it. And that's part of what makes me think this is going to get a whole lot worse, because there's no consequence to America engaging in this sort of behavior as of yet. We're going to feel the consequences internally. Because this is a project that revolves around the consolidation of wealth and power by the owning class, it means enshittification will ensue. Things will infinitely get worse just for decades in the United States. Conditions will worsen, but no reckoning is going to come from the international community until they have to have an internal reckoning of their own with worsening conditions at home in their countries. Wild how you just talked about and then left alone. Yeah, they should do something. They're not going to. Because remember, Remember what I said, capital is international. Capital does not know any borders. The same interests that are currently running the United States are friendly to, or are the same interests running all the European countries too, big companies. Sure, the EU is like a more active regulatory body, but they are still tepid at the best of times. And ultimately, you know, they're fine with this. This is what they wanted too, right? Like I said, capital is international. And yes, other countries are going to start behaving like this. China now has ample reason to just kind of invade Taiwan and reabsorb it. In fact, China would have better legal arguments to do that with Taiwan than the United States did with Venezuela or would for Cuba, right? Like this is negative consequences all around. And like I said, no country is going to check the United States on this because the U.S. is too powerful, still represents too big of an economic unit, and is still too economically interconnected despite all the tariffs. Yeah, it's just this. The only way that this sort of behavior is going to change is when the internal contradictions in America sharpen so greatly that reckoning starts to come from within. Political reckoning. And the only way that reckoning would come from other countries is if those other countries have those internal reckonings with worsening economic conditions first, which, as Europeans are eager to point out, would not happen in Europe before America, because America's economic situation is much, much worse than that of most European countries. America is more economically unstable and more addled by debt person per person than the average European country. Even the not as wealthy ones, are more economically stable than America in the sense that they have a real economic base. Only thing I know of is that we stopped working together with the US and the Caribbean due to them taking out those ships. Relatively inconsequential, I would say. A lot of those moves are going to be optics at the best of times. It's going to be like, oh, this is bad optics to do this. But like, not doing joint exercises with America and the Caribbean is going to not matter very much. There's no, like, it's a performative thing. I'm going to take my ball and go home. Meanwhile, the United States standing in front of the ball factory, which produces infinite balls. I couldn't keep a straight face. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's one of the major flaws with liberal internationalism, which becomes a feature of fascist internationalism, which is that if one state starts acting belligerently, if America turns into a rogue state, much like how Europe was not willing to check Israel meaningfully, despite the fact that like the entire global public hates Israel for the genocide and atrocities it's committing in Palestine, no states have really taken action against them, not big ones anyway. So they're obviously like, Israel only represents a proxy of American interests. America is the actual thing. They're going to be even less willing to do anything regarding America's actions than Israel. America just represents that much more of a, you get it. I think I've made the argument enough times at this point. Hit him with the conditions will worsen. This is my analysis of the situation. End the segment.
Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.